It was the morning of December 23rd, 2023, a Saturday. Nandini was going about her day when she received an unexpected phone call from someone she hadn't spoken to in a while, her childhood friend Manan. The two had experienced some tension recently, and their communication had become distant. Still, having known him since they were kids, Nandini didn't feel right ignoring his call. On the call, Vy sounded genuinely apologetic. He expressed regret for the recent misunderstandings and suggested they patch things up, especially since the following day was Nandini's birthday. As a gesture of goodwill, he revealed that he had planned a surprise and even bought her some birthday gifts. He proposed they spend the day together to celebrate. Touched by his thoughtfulness and the memories of their long-time friendship, Nandini agreed. Nandini, 25, lives in Chennai and works at a software company. Vy Manan, also part of her childhood circle, works as a software engineer at a different company in the same city. Both are well-educated professionals, earning decent salaries and leading relatively stable lives. As planned, the next morning, December 24th, Nandini got up early, excited for the day ahead. Vy came to pick her up. Their first stop was a temple, a quiet and meaningful beginning to the day. After that, he took her shopping at a nearby mall, followed by a pleasant lunch and a walk through a local market. Everything felt lighthearted, warm, and genuine, just like old times. As the evening approached, Vy surprised Nandini once more. He took her to an orphanage, explaining that instead of just celebrating, they should do something good and meaningful on her birthday. He had brought gifts for the children there, something Nandini hadn't expected. She was genuinely moved by the gesture. Watching the children smile and laugh brought her a sense of joy and gratitude. She felt lucky to have such a thoughtful friend. After all the activities, around 7:30 p.m., Nandini suggested it was time to head home. Vy nodded but mentioned he had one final surprise left for her before calling it a day. Curious, Nandini agreed. Instead of driving her home, Vy took a turn off the main road and drove about 15 kilometers outside of Chennai, eventually stopping at an empty, secluded plot of land. They both stepped out of the car. Vy looked at her and said, "This last surprise is something special. But for it to work, you have to close your eyes. No peeking, promise?" Trusting him completely, Nandini smiled and agreed. He then blindfolded her. That alone seemed playful, maybe even romantic, but then, unexpectedly, he began tying her hands and feet with chains. Startled, Nandini asked, "Why are you doing this?" Vy laughed it off and told her that he didn't want her to run off in excitement once she saw the surprise. It was all part of the plan. Though it felt odd, Nandini didn't resist. Maybe it was the deep trust she had in him, built over years of friendship, that stopped her from questioning it further. But then pain. Sudden, sharp pain in her neck, wrists, and limbs. Nandini started to panic. She couldn't see anything, but the pain kept growing. Vy was hurting her, cutting her with something sharp. Realizing this was no joke, Nandini screamed, cried, and begged him to stop. "Why are you doing this? Please help me," she cried out. But Vy didn't respond. Instead, he continued. Moments later, he poured petrol over her and lit a match. Flames erupted. Nandini screamed in agony, pleading with Vy to save her, but he ran away, vanishing into the darkness. By sheer chance, some people walking down the road nearby heard a woman's screams. Horrified, they rushed to the scene, only to find a young woman, blindfolded, her hands and feet chained, surrounded by fire. They acted quickly, dousing the flames and calling the police. The authorities arrived swiftly and rushed Nandini to the hospital. Her injuries were severe. While doctors began emergency treatment, the police needed to identify her and notify her family. Once Nandini regained partial consciousness, they asked if she could provide any contact details. Through immense pain, she spoke just one name, Vy Manan, and gave his phone number. This part is especially chilling. Even after what he did, she still gave his number to the police. She didn't mention her family or any sibling. Perhaps she wanted to make sure the police would trace him. Maybe she knew she might not survive, and this was her only chance to leave behind a clue. The police called the number. When VY answered and heard it was the police, he was clearly shaken. They told him that a woman had been found badly burned and she had named him as an emergency contact. They asked him to come to the hospital immediately. Trying to stay calm, VY pretended not to know much. "Yes, I'm her friend. I'll come right away," he replied. Later, he arrived at the hospital as instructed. The police questioned him, and he said the victim was Nandini, his friend. He mentioned it was her birthday, but claimed he had no idea how she ended up injured. After some brief questioning, he was allowed to see Nandini in the ICU. She was in critical condition, barely conscious. Meanwhile, the police began to investigate further, and soon, things would begin to unfold. As the days passed, Nandini's condition in the hospital initially showed signs of slight improvement. She was able to respond enough for the police to begin asking more questions and advance their investigation. But just as hope began to rise, the situation took a heartbreaking turn. Nandini succumbed to her injuries. Once the doctors confirmed her passing, the police began looking for VY Manan in the hospital to inform him of her death. But to their surprise, he was nowhere to be found. The hospital staff claimed they had no record of him, and he hadn't been seen since the last time he was allowed into the ICU. When the police tried calling his phone, it was switched off. This sudden disappearance puzzled everyone. How could the very person Nandini had trusted, the one whose name she gave in her final moments, simply vanish without a trace? It made them question the nature of their friendship. Was he really the close friend she thought he was? Or had he deliberately used her trust against her? Despite lingering questions, the investigation had to move forward. The police tracked down Nandini's family and informed them of the tragic news. Given the horrific details, her being blindfolded, chained, and then set on fire, it was clear this was no accident. It was a brutal and calculated act of murder. The case was formally registered as a homicide, and a dedicated team was assigned to uncover the full truth. Their first step was to search Nandini's residence for any clues. They followed this up with interviews at her workplace and among her friends. Piece by piece, a clearer picture started to emerge. Multiple people confirmed that Nandini had spent her birthday, the very day she was attacked, with a friend named VY Manan. This matched the name she had given before her death, solidifying his importance in the investigation. Now more determined than ever, the police worked to trace the last known location of VY Manan using his phone number. After persistent efforts, they eventually located and arrested him. Interrogation began immediately. The biggest question on everyone's mind was simple yet disturbing. Why? Why would someone who had known Nandini for years, someone she trusted deeply, do something so cruel? What could possibly drive a person to such violent extremes? As the investigation dug deeper, the shocking truth behind Nandini's tragic end started to unravel. But before we dive into the next part of the story, a quick request. If you find stories like this important and want to help more people discover them, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. It takes a lot of effort to create these narratives, and your support truly means a lot. Thank you. Now let's go back to where it all began. Nandini and VY Manan both lived in Mayiladuthurai, Tamil Nadu. Their friendship dated all the way back to first grade. Along with a third close friend, they formed a tight-knit trio, always together from elementary school until they graduated high school. They were inseparable. After school, life took them to different universities for higher education. Despite the physical distance, they promised to stay in touch, and they did. They called each other regularly, sharing everything from daily routines to life's deeper moments. One day, something significant happened. Their mutual friend, Pundi Maheshwari, came to Nandini with something deeply personal. She said there was a truth she had never been able to tell anyone, but she felt Nandini would understand. Pundi revealed that, although she was assigned female at birth, she had always felt like a boy on the inside. She was transgender. Fear of her parents and societal rejection had kept her from telling anyone, but she felt safe enough to share this with Nandini. When VY Manan, the same person we now know as VY Manan, shared his true gender identity with his closest friends, the reactions were mixed. One friend ended the relationship entirely, unable to reconcile the change. But Nandini didn't abandon him. She chose to stand by him. It wasn't easy. India's societal norms around gender identity and LGBTQ+ issues remain conservative in many places. Nandini herself came from a family unfamiliar with such topics. Things like gender dysphoria, same-sex attraction, and transgender identity were alien concepts in her household. But none of that mattered to her. Nandini supported Vetri wholeheartedly. At one point, when Vetri came out to his own family, they rejected him. He was cast out of his home, forced to face the world alone. But Nandini stayed by his side. By 2019, Vetri had moved to Bangalore. He had completed his college education and secured a job there. He began saving money, determined to undergo gender affirmation surgery, even though he lacked the emotional or financial support of his family. The only steady support he had during this time was from Nandini. Their bond had endured many ups and downs. But what went so wrong? What happened between them that led to such a horrifying end? Stay tuned as we uncover the dark turn this relationship took in the next chapter of this story. Throughout his journey, Vetri Manan confided in Nandini at every step. Whether it was the struggles he faced during his gender transition or the happiness he experienced after the surgery, Nandini was always there to listen. She supported him wholeheartedly and celebrated his courage. Even though they lived in different cities after college, their friendship remained strong. Nandini had taken up a job in a private IT firm and moved in with her uncle in Chennai. As fate would have it, Manan also ended up relocating to Chennai after some time. In a surprising twist, both of them ended up working for the same company. The reunion made them both extremely happy. It was like reliving their school days, only now as adults with careers. This wasn't just a regular friendship. Their bond ran deep. They shared not just laughter and memories, but also pain, identity struggles, and life's biggest decisions. But what remains the most haunting question in this entire story is, why did he kill her? How could someone harm the very person who stood by him when no one else did? The answer lies in unreciprocated love. By 2023, after completing his gender affirmation surgery and living as VY Manan, he had come to a profound realization. Nandini wasn't just a friend. In his eyes, she was the one. He began to see her as irreplaceable, the only person who had truly accepted him, supported him, and stood by him when others had turned away. With time, this deep admiration transformed into romantic feelings. VY Manan fell in love with Nandini. He believed that since she had accepted him as a person, she would also accept him as a partner. But he kept his emotions to himself at first. Eventually, he couldn't keep it in any longer. He confessed his feelings to Nandini, hoping she would feel the same and that their long friendship would evolve into something more. But to his dismay, Nandini didn't respond the way he expected. She was shocked. Nandini told VY Manan that while she respected and cared for him deeply, she had never seen him as more than a friend. In her heart, he was still the same childhood friend, once known as Pandi Maheshwari, whom she supported out of genuine friendship, not romantic love. She gently explained that she could not return his feelings. Though she respected his transition and identity, their relationship, from her perspective, would always remain platonic. This rejection deeply wounded Manan. He couldn't accept it. He begged her not to walk away, professed his love, and urged her to reconsider. But Nandini remained firm in her stance. What followed were a series of arguments, fueled by his frustration and emotional instability. As they continued working at the same company, things worsened. VY Manan began noticing Nandini spending time with a male colleague and making new friends. This triggered his possessiveness. He grew obsessive, disliking her interactions with other men, and began confronting her over it. Their conversations turned into fights. His constant interference pushed Nandini further away. Eventually, she stopped communicating with him altogether. For several days, there was silence between them. Then came December 23rd. VY Manan called Nandini out of the blue. He suggested they reconcile and put their differences behind them. Nandini agreed, not to restart their friendship, but to end things peacefully. She told him they should both move on with their lives. Still clinging to hope, VY apologized multiple times. He reminded her that her birthday was the next day and that he had planned something special. He asked her to spend the day with him one last time. On December 24th, Nandini's birthday, he took her out, as we now know, to the temple, shopping, lunch, and finally to an orphanage. It all seemed like a thoughtful and heartfelt gesture. But behind the mask of kindness, he harbored darkness. By evening, he led her to a remote location under the pretext of a final birthday surprise. There, he betrayed her in the most unimaginable way, chaining, torturing, and ultimately setting her on fire. A horrific act on the day she was born, committed by the person she trusted the most. What makes it even more tragic is that Nandini's family had known VY Manan since childhood. He had visited their home, been part of their lives, and was seen as a trusted figure. Yet, he couldn't come to terms with the fact that she never saw him as anything more than a friend. Instead of accepting her decision and cherishing her support, he chose to silence her forever. And with that, we come to the end of this heartbreaking story. It's a reminder that trust is fragile, and even the closest of bonds can sometimes hide unspoken dangers. Let us all be more aware, more cautious, and above all, value the boundaries and choices of others. If you found this story powerful and think it needs to be heard, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more real stories to light, and it means a lot. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your loved ones.